The World Health Organization have recently published two new sets of guidelines. The first is on indoor air quality related to household fuel combustion, and the second is on recommending new limiting values for small particulate matter exposure. These levels are considerably below those currently operating in the EU. The guidelines focus on the fact that the inefficient burning of solid fuels in households represents an important contributor to the 482,000 deaths counted in the European region during 2012 that were directly related to air pollution. Particulate matter is a complex mixture of extremely small solids and liquid droplets that is made up from a number of chemical components including acids, soot, and metals like lead. So the materials involved are mainly quite toxic. The composition, though, is not the only problem. The sizes matter too, and they can become deposited into the larger tracheobronchial branches of our lungs, where the effects on at-risk people, that's children, pregnant mothers, asthmatics, and those suffering from cardiovascular problems, can be severe, especially over long exposure times. The atmosphere is everywhere, and air pollutants do not respect national boundaries. And so air quality legislation, which is derived from EU air quality directives, is implemented both in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. One purpose of this legislation is to address public health impacts from pollutants released by sources like road transport and the residential use of solid fuels. As a result, there are smoky coal ban areas in the Republic of Ireland and smoke control areas in Northern Ireland. But what next? Where, legislatively speaking, should the island of Ireland move to regarding the provision of clean air to all of its inhabitants? In 2014, a fact-finding report was commissioned by the North-South Ministerial Council on the use of domestic solid fuels. It is expected to be published by the end of 2015 and will be made up of sections quantifying solid fuel usage, current air monitoring activities and health impacts. The SAPPHIRE research project, which is sponsored by the Irish Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is aimed at trying to improve our knowledge and understanding of air pollutants that are being released specifically in a number of Irish small towns like Killarney in Kerry and Enniscorthy in Wexford. The results will be fed back to the EPA, which is tasked with managing Ireland's air monitoring and assessment programme. It does this by coordinating the activities of a nationwide network of monitoring stations that are run directly by the EPA, along with the many separate local councils who, under Ireland's Air Pollution Act, must take whatever measures they consider necessary to prevent or limit air pollution in their own areas. This has been helped by the recent statement by the Minister of the Environment to say that within a year or 2 years there'll be a smoky coal ban throughout the whole of the Republic of Ireland. Our SAPPHIRE project not only consists of researchers from the Crack Lab at UCC, but also involves a number of interested stakeholders who wish to know what is actually going on in the air that we breathe. This film includes the points of view of 3 people: Sharon Cosgrove, who is CEO of the Asthma Society, David Dodd, who represents both the EPA and the Department of the Environment, and Brendan Cooney, who is the Senior Executive Scientist in Wexford County Council.
Asthma is a respiratory disease, and it's where the airways and the lungs become inflamed as a result of exposure to triggers. Quite often is the cause of that. We're a charity, and we've been around for about 40 years, and our role is to represent people with asthma, to provide them with services and to advocate on behalf of people with asthma to ensure that there's improvements that will benefit them. Our mission is to improve the lives of people with asthma and to save lives, and we work to ensure that people live a full life symptom-free. We know that one of the biggest triggers for people with asthma is pollution that's in the air. So we know that things like the burning of smoky coal or pollution from cars can cause problems for people with asthma.
Depending on the size of the particle, sort of less than 2.5, they're getting right down into your lungs, into your alveoli. Even less than that, they can get actually into your bloodstream. And then depending on the chemicals that may be adsorbed onto those particles can cause difficulties, particularly in, I suppose, immunodepressed individuals. So maybe the older age people or people who have immune diseases, and also people who have bronchial chest issues, and young people. So it can cause a range of health issues. I suppose from maybe an aesthetic point of view, you've probably seen pictures from the 80s, from the 70s in city centres in Dublin, where the buildings were grimy and black, and you're getting like black carbon and particulates embedded onto the front of buildings. You can still see issues like that in some towns where there's a lot of solid fuel use, and that can be an issue from I suppose an aesthetic point of view. In terms of reducing fuel emissions, I suppose it does depend on how you heat your house. I suppose a great thing to be able to do would be that houses were built to a sufficient standard that you would need very little external fuel to be used to heat your house. So there is a concept of passive house standard, where you really don't need an external fuel source to heat your house, and that the house is designed with sufficient energy efficiency built into the walls and the windows that you get most of your heat from the sun, essentially. You can use heat exchangers to exchange the heat in different parts of the house, but that's maybe we're a long way off from having all our houses to a passive house standard. So I suppose increasing your insulation in your house will obviously mean that your house, your environment are more they're warmer, more comfortable, and you won't need to use as much I suppose external fuel. But where you don't have that option, perhaps you don't have the money to retrofit your house, you don't have the money to put in extra insulation, you're forced to make a decision on what fuel you use. So choosing a cleaner fuel is obviously the best thing to do, maybe a smokeless fuel. Buying an appliance which has a good standard, good quality standard on it, so that the emissions from it are within acceptable levels. Obviously, if you have natural gas in your area, it is a clean gas. It's a fossil fuel. Yes, it is a fossil fuel, and I suppose a resource which is being used up and does contribute to climate change. But it is a cleaner fuel to burn than the likes of coal, the likes of some wood and peat. So there, I suppose, some of the things that you can do to try and reduce your emissions. Having maybe seen some of the results from one of the previous monitoring areas in Killarney, I would have an expectation that certainly in the evening time, when people come home from work, kids are in from school, people tend to turn on their heating appliances or throw some fuel on the grate.
We would campaign to improve the air quality for people who have asthma. We would like to see a national ban on smoky coal. We know it's in a number of towns and cities around the country, but we've been campaigning over the last 2 years to ensure that there's a nationwide ban on smoky coal.
Air quality and air in general, I suppose, is a resource that people tend to take for granted. And in Ireland, I suppose, if you look at our air quality reports over the last number of years, typically our air quality is quite good. I suppose we're getting in a fairly clean air mass from the Atlantic, a southwesterly predominantly airflow, bringing in clean air. But in recent years, I suppose there have been some changes in terms of people's fuel use in particular, which are causing some concerns.
At the moment, there's in Wexford Town we have a smokeless zone, and we are trying to enforce it there at the moment with regard to that. With regard to the other towns in Enniscorthy, there is no legislation there at the moment, so we can do nothing at the moment. All we can do is just to note the complaint, and that's all we can do.
All right. Have you tried to contact the EPA to do anything about this?
Yes, the EPA are aware of it. We've also been talking with the Department of Environment as well, and they are, both organisations are aware that there are issues with regard to air quality in smaller towns. In 2014 they started doing some monitoring there, and the results are indicating that there are some problems there, or yes, there is. And they're basically showing that the air quality is actually breaching the European legislation limits at the moment. And those limits are set to that if you go above the limit, you will have health issues with regard to the public.
We've the fourth highest prevalence of asthma in the world, after Australia, New Zealand and the UK. Then Ireland is fourth, and in Ireland we have about 470,000 people with asthma, about 1 in 10 of the population. So we have a really high prevalence of asthma.
We get problems with nearly all the major towns like Gorey, Enniscorthy, New Ross, Wexford Town as well. They all have they're all very similar complaints. Just a lot of people complain about smoke in the air, particularly in the evenings when they're coming home, they're going out for a walk, things like that, and they're feeling it's just difficult in breathing and things like that when they're walking along, particularly in the winter months.
We will certainly be seeing an increase in particulate levels in the evening time. Obviously that depends on the weather conditions. I know we had quite a mild start to the winter in October. We were getting very high, unusually high temperatures in October, and people weren't using as much heat. But certainly in December and January we've had some lower temperatures, and having been in Enniscorthy a number of times over the last month or so, certainly you can see the fires on in the evening time. So certainly I would say an increase in particulate levels in the evening time, possibly early in the morning as well, as people get up early, maybe might put some fuel on the fire, turn on the heating, and also you have the usual sort of traffic peaks that you can see in the morning time. Some of the instrumentation that we have here on site, that UCC research team have on site, you should be able to pick up some of those peaks. We're looking to see what type of fuel types I suppose are being used, and we can get a handle on what's being used in terms of looking at some of the fuel that's being sold and trying to get some information on what types of fuel are being sold. Also looking at some of the suppliers, talking to some of the suppliers around to see what types of fuels are being sold. But some fuels are more hazardous than others in terms of the emissions that come from them. Certainly the World Health Organization last year, end of 2013, certainly issued some fairly dire warnings about the continued use of coal in terms of its health implications. And I think there are some issues around maybe the quality of fuels that are being sold, particularly in the wood market. Certainly I've seen myself pulling into petrol stations across the country. You can see wood which is of maybe dubious quality in terms of burning in a grate. It looks like maybe it's just been cut down maybe a couple of weeks beforehand. The moisture content is high, and it's not properly dried, which would give a much better burn in a grate or a fireplace, as opposed to wet wood, which a lot of the heat goes into actually burning off the moisture, reduces the temperature, which can have implications in terms of the compounds and the chemicals that are formed in the flue and then go out into the atmosphere that people breathe in. So I think there's an issue around fuel quality as well. So also peat use, maybe we wouldn't expect as much here in Enniscorthy as we would say in Killarney or another site which is closer to a peat source. But some of the instrumentation that has been used, hopefully we'll be able to differentiate and apportion what types of fuels are being used in this locality.
And that would also be very good to be able to get a reading indoors and outdoors. We're hoping that over the next while we're going to hopefully carry out some research or partner with somebody that'll help us look at the levels within the home in particular, and to help inform, so that we can help inform our members and housing providers about how they can reduce that within the home. We have quite good information at a national level on the prevalence of asthma and how it affects different age groups. We don't have information on the levels of asthma or the prevalence of asthma at a local level. So we would like to see better data on asthma nationally.
Wexford towns, it'd be like any other town in the country. What we need to do is we need to have better legislation to go along and to control burning, particularly burning of coal. That is one of the major issues that we do see, is that people are burning bituminous coal in open fires. So they're very, very inefficient. An awful lot of the heat has gone up the chimney, but also an awful lot of the particulates that are coming from the coal. The PM10 is just some very, very high readings at the moment, what we're finding.
Air quality and air in general, I suppose, is a resource that people tend to take for granted. And in Ireland, I suppose, if you look at our air quality reports over the last number of years, typically our air quality is quite good. I suppose we're getting in a fairly clean air mass from the Atlantic, a southwesterly predominantly airflow, bringing in clean air. But in recent years, I suppose there have been some changes in terms of people's fuel use in particular, which are causing some concerns, not just in Ireland, but across Europe. And in particular with the use of solid fuel use. There's a lot of more people who are using stoves for their main heating in their houses, and burning combinations of coal, wood, peat, etc. And I suppose from maybe a climate change perspective, while burning wood is a sort of a low carbon method of fueling and heating your house, but from an air quality perspective it actually can cause issues in terms of the particulate matter that comes from the burning of that wood, similarly from coal and from peat.
We know that things like allergies are on the increase, so allergies are very strongly linked to asthma. So for that reason, we know that that it's likely that asthma is on the increase. The other thing that's increasing in the population, particularly in young children, is obesity, and we know that children who are obese are more likely to have asthma and are more at risk of asthma.
At the moment, our research programme is split into three main pillars. So we have the pillar for climate, under which air quality projects would come. We have a pillar for sustainability, and we have a pillar for water quality research. They would be our three main pillars. We've been lucky, I suppose, to have been able to have a research call every year for the past decade. So we would issue a call for particular topics, particular areas, and we would invite applications from academia, from interested research groups to send us in applications on particular topics. They would be evaluated by international and national experts, and then we would issue awards towards the end of each year, and typically the projects would start at the beginning of the following year. I suppose the overarching aim of our research programme, I suppose, is first of all to identify pressures. So identifying pressures on the environment, whether that be air quality, water quality, soil, waste issues. After that, I suppose what we're trying to do is develop solutions to those particular problems. So hopefully the research projects and the fellowships that we fund can develop solutions to some of the issues that have been identified. And I suppose lastly, it's to inform policy. So the policy that the government comes up with in terms of whether it be climate change, in terms of keeping our air clean, keeping our water clean. So that's really the aim of our research, in that we try to produce and fund high quality research with high quality academic institutions that will help to improve our environmental policy and improve the environment for all.
It will be at a national level. I mean, at a local level, we just don't have the resources to carry out that, and we don't have the right to enforce that, to enact that legislation either. That is at a national basis, and it'll have to be done from there. I think the biggest impact would be to have it on the Republic. It would be lovely to have it on an all-Ireland basis, but if we can't have that, at least we should do it for the 26 counties. We should have legislation there controlling the burning of bituminous coal.